Netherite is an interesting resource. See, Minecraft is a pretty satisfying progression system normally, where every tier you go up, it feels like you've entered a new era of progress in the game, with many new avenues opening up to you to explore. Netherite, however, broke this progression system in a fairly major way, as it never really felt natural, at least to me, as all the tiers prior to Netherite are required for beating the game, fighting the Ender Dragon, and provide some sort of specific use. Wood is required to collect stone, stone to iron, iron to diamond, and diamond provides the ability to collect obsidian for the Nether. Obviously, there are ways to ignore certain parts by just skipping straight to diamonds by exploring ruins, or you could just play like a speedrunner and skip most of the tiers. However, for most players, this is the general progression. Notice, however, Netherite isn't required to beat Minecraft or, well, get anything that is. Netherite is an upgrade in itself that provides nothing other than slightly improved gear, which in a lot of ways I find reduces its value. Obviously, not every piece of loot needs to be required for game progression. Just take, for example, the Elytra. See, most players get this after they've already beaten the Ender Dragon, and really, it's not required for anything, right? It's not as though you need to fly like 1,000 blocks into the sky to go into the Aether dimension. It's just a really nice item to have that provides a lot of utility for movement, and also, it's just quite fun, so you can justify getting it. Netherite, on the other hand, at least on release, was a pretty trivial upgrade. It makes your tools have a bit higher durability and deal a bit more damage, in addition to making your armor have some knockback resistance, which, at least in single players, pretty trivial, but in multiplayer has its merits, and armor toughness, which, if you don't know what armor toughness is, it's basically just another factor in the armor damage calculation that reduces damage taken. So higher armor toughness just means better armor, so it's a little bit better armor. Though in theory these all sound decent, more damage dealt, less damage taken, and a little bit of durability, it brings into question whether or not this buff was needed, as, you see, most people were used to beating the hardest enemies in Minecraft without this gear, and in a natural progression, frequently you won't even have this when you're fighting the hardest mobs, so it brings into question why you would need such strong armor and weapons. Probably the most redeeming factor about Netherite is the multiple collection methods. Finding a bastion is quite fun and looting it is pretty hype because there's pretty strong mobs in it. However, in general, the best part of a bastion to me is looking for pickstep, and honestly, once I've gotten pickstep before, I'm usually out of there. This is worsened by the fact that collecting enough Netherite for gear, if you were to do purely pigment bastions, would take way too many bastions, and that can be rough, given they can be pretty hard to find, and doing the same type of structure over and over can get really tedious, even if they do have some varying forms. Thus, this led players, especially in the past, just to grind out Netherite by mining or bed mining, which, although is a pretty cool message, is also quite tedious, especially when compared to the feeling of mining diamonds. Being both tedious to collect and unrewarding for the effort put in, Netherite became a pretty neglected resource, especially between me and my friends. We would pretty much never collect it unless we got some happen in a bastion while we were getting pigstep, and frankly, if I got ancient debris, I would just use them as building blocks since I honestly think they look pretty cool. However, that was when Netherite was released. The game's gotten many updates since then, which has affected the progression of the game and benefited Netherite in a variety of ways. For example, since the Cave and Cliff the Wild update, we now have the Warden, which adds a much stronger late game challenge than prior bosses, as the Warden hits for 3 times the Ender Dragon's damage on hard mode, which prior was the highest damage that's consistent. Obviously there are things like a charged creeper explosion, but those can be avoided more easily, and he's gonna die afterwards, like the Warden ain't gonna die after he hits you once, right? Additionally, having 100 more hearts of health than the Wither on Java Edition, suddenly having stronger gear actually becomes more useful, since the Warden suddenly poses a truly major challenge, even with the top Netherite gear. You can partially debate that the Warden and Ancient City have their own flaws, like being too RNG to find since there's no real indicators, and the fact that their rewards can be a bit goofy, especially that music disc that's honestly, it's such a pretty music disc with the cool mechanic around it, but it's just a lore disc, so that just means it sounds terrible. But honestly, the Ancient City is one of the best Minecraft experiences I've ever had. It's just such a beautifully generated area, and the mechanic with the Warden where you're trying to be quiet so he doesn't hear you is just so much fun, and the suspense is like nothing else in the game. Additionally, the most recent update, Trails and Tails, now added the Netherite armor upgrade as well as trimmings. These two things both make the Netherite armor set more valuable in two very distinct ways. First, with the Netherite armor upgrade, it feels like an adventure now when you're collecting Netherite scraps, since you have to go to Bastions, and when you do loot it and you find that Netherite armor upgrade, there is a bit of satisfaction to it, as opposed to before where in a lot of ways it could feel just trivial and like, why am I not just mining for this, you know? Secondly, by adding trimmings, every armor set kind of gets a new sheen to it, since different trimming styles and colors will look much different on different armors. This is especially notable for Netherite, since Netherite by itself is one of the more plain backgrounds, making it work really well to allow colors and patterns on it shine, especially since it has a nice dark aesthetic. Which is ironic since before, at least for me personally, I always found Netherite to be one of the least pleasing visually armors, but now I find it super pleasing because of the trimmings. Suddenly now, with the tier of armor having an endgame enemy use as well as being more fun to collect and being drippier than ever, Netherite becomes a fun endgame resource in Minecraft that I find adds a lot. It's really enjoyable to see Minecraft over time improving on the game in such a way that these old mechanics like Netherite, which were fairly trivial and uninspired on release, now are exciting and actually provide something to the game. Hopefully they continue doing this, and, well, if there's anything you guys think they should add, maybe mention it in the comments so we can talk about it. I personally feel like these new caves, they're really lovely, and the ancient city's sick, but it can be really hard to find the ancient city. Obviously, there is apparently a way where if you find mountains, there's like a higher chance of the ancient city being below mountains, but I still feel like maybe there could be something like the Woodland Mansion map, or like pieces of a map you accumulate in underground areas, but that's just my opinion. Anyways guys, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed, consider checking out my other stuff, or well, if you didn't, I mean, you don't have to. Like, what am I gonna do, you know? Not like I have a netherite sword and I'm slowly approaching you with it from behind. Yeah, bye guys.